I believe.
Yeah, Chris Pikula, the meddling mage here, certainly not having an easy route to the top 8s. We saw he already had to defeat Gerard Fabiano round 3. 2 rounds later, he's playing up against Max Tietze.
Max Tietze, Invitational winner, also undefeated, although he does have 1 draw with Goblins, and he is on the play, both players keeping on 7, and he's got Cavern on Goblin for a Goblin Lackey on turn 1.
That's got to be a pretty scary draw for a lot of blue decks if they don't have the removal spell for Goblin.
But Chris does, and
Chris does
the Lightning Bolt, and keeping the board clear. So Max untaps his Cavern. He's going to cast a, he's going to play a Taiga here, and looks like Taiga is going to add a mana for an Aether Vial.
Yeah, remember here, so Max Tietze is one of the most seasoned Goblin players on the circuit right now. The Legacy Open winner in Atlanta, both this year and last year, both times piloting Goblins. You see kind of a heads-up play where you have that thing where you have to say, do I want to turn 1 Lackey, do I want to turn 1 Aether Vial? He goes with the Lackey.
And it looks like Chris has a turn 2 play as well, and it is a Tarmogoyf. And the Tarmogoyf, currently a 2/3. We've got a creature and an instant currently, and an Aether Vial ticks up on Max's upkeep, and he's going to go ahead and decide on his play for the turn. So looks like he's got a 2 mana play here.
Interesting enough, in this matchup, the mono red deck is the control deck for sure. So Chris Pikula is the one who's going to be trying to mana deny the Goblins deck. He's trying to push damage through. That's going to be pretty hard due to the Aether Vial that's in play.
So we've got a Mog War Marshal from Max, and he brings along a little Goblin buddy. And a Brainstorm from Chris on his turn, main phase. Finds a polluted delta already, so he's not looking for a land drop. He is just looking for some more business, more ways to interact with Max's deck.
Well, the hard thing right here is that Pikula is not going to be able to answer the Aether Vial. So because of that, a lot of his cards you see he has multiple Spell Pierces in his hand. It's going to be really hard for him to make them live. So he really is going to have to find some way to be aggressive. He's going to need to find some Delvers, flip them, start turning them sideways. Max, especially with Mog War Marshal, is going to be able to come up the ground pretty well. And the longer this game goes, the Goblins deck's just going to draw more cards.
So Fetch Land Cracked from Chris Pikula is going to find a Volcanic Island. Currently, I believe we have Land Creature Instant, so that is a slightly larger Tarmogoyf than is indicated on that die there. And Chris is going to go ahead and change it. 3/4 Tarmogoyf.
All right.
And we're going to have a Ponder from Chris, looking for some action.
Yeah, remember, Chris had the option of playing Nimble Mongoose in addition to playing the Ponder there, and kind of what we said before, where he needs to find a way to be aggressive, really with that Delver of Secrets, he's opting to play Ponder.
Yeah, and he immediately decides he wants to shuffle away those top 3, and so he's going to get a random one off the top, and it is a Brainstorm. So
could have
more
done a lot
library
worse.
manipulation, yeah. Tarmogoyf is now 4/5 after that sorcery hits the graveyard, and he's going to swing in. Mog War Marshal is going to get in the way and protect Max's life total, leaving behind a little buddy.
And there's the guy, Delver of Secrets. Because Chris is going to be, we're going to see just how aggressive he wants to play as. I feel we might see an upkeep Brainstorm to try to ensure that Delver flip.
Yeah, I agree. I think we've already seen it from Chris earlier in this tournament, and I imagine he will consider that next turn. So on Max's turn, Max is going to swing in with his 2 Goblin tokens.
Yeah, Max's deck though with plenty of answers to Delver of Secrets, and there's probably the best one his deck has to offer. It's Gem Palm Incinerator.
Yeah, that's going to not only be uncounterable removal, but it gets to draw him a card. He cycles it, it burns a creature for the number of Goblins in play, and the number of Goblins he controls, and draw a card.
Number of Goblins both players control.
Is it?
But
Is
it doesn't
in play?
actually. Yeah, it doesn't actually matter in this matchup.
Yeah,
as
it doesn't.
Pikula has no Goblins.
And
yeah, that whole cycle from Onslaught actually counted all of the creature type.
Yeah.
Sometimes causing fairly crazy side effects.
So Wasteland from Max, and then he passes back. Tarmogoyf now 5/6 after the second Aether Vial for Max is dazed.
Right. So the other option that Chris can try to do, if he really thinks that these Delver Secrets are not going to, are going to continue to get killed, the other thing he can try to do is find just multiple Tarmogoyfs and just start crashing with them. If Max's draw is relatively fair, that could be enough. If Max has the kind of thing where he's going to, start playing like Siege Gang Commanders into into Goblin War Chiefs and other spells, that can become very difficult for him.
Yeah,
I was going to say Chieftain, but actually Max is running no Goblin Chieftains.
So Tarmogoyf does crash in and connect for 5, and a Delver of Secrets joins the force there on Chris's side. Again, he has 1 mana up. He can potentially brainstorm on upkeep or even during Max's end step to ensure that Delver flips should it survive. Currently Max's turn. 2 Goblin tokens, an Aether Vial on 3, and 3 lands in play, including a Cavern of Souls on Goblin, Wasteland, and a Taiga. So Max is considering his play for the turn. Looks like he's got something in mind that costs 2 mana, but possibly reconsidering.
You see here a pretty heads-up play on Max. He has the Wasteland, but is choosing not to Wasteland Chris Pikula. The lands are more valuable in Max's lands are more valuable than Chris's here.
Despite the Aether Vial there. Interesting.
Right, well the Aether Vial makes things uncounterable. He still might have to do things, he still might have to pay extra, spells could get dazed. Unless Max is actually planning to cast everything from under the Aether Vial, he still may need some of his lands.
So he is going to actually activate that Aether Vial for the first time this game, and we're going to see a Goblin Matron uncounterable. So Chris can respond, but he can't really do much as far as keeping that Goblin Matron from hitting the table and allowing Max to tutor up a Goblin Ringleader.
And here's that card advantage engine that really pushes Goblins so hard, especially with the Aether Vial can curve one into the other. A Matron ends up getting 4 more, 3 to 4 more Goblins as it gets the Ringleader, which then gets 2 and 3 more creatures.
Yeah. So you see a Bloodstained Mire is going to be immediately played and cracked to fetch a basic island, and Max has the 4 mana available to cast that Ringleader if that's what he wants to do with the rest of his turn.
He's got to be careful here. Ringleader is such a valuable card in the matchup that you can't be too cavalier with them. Max is just going to go ahead and cast it. Let's see if it works. And it does.
It finds him 3
Sharpshooter, Incinerator, and Pile Driver.
Yeah, 3 Goblins.
So interesting, one thing I've noticed from Max, I said was running no Goblin Chieftains, that's the Lord from the core set. He is running a full 4 Goblin Pile Drivers, which is a change which I think a lot of players have moved away from as of late.
Alright, so with a force of Goblin Matron, Goblin Ringleader, and 2 Goblin tokens, Max Tietze now going to swing in everybody but the Matron, which has Summoning Sickness currently, and a Lightning Bolt is going to take out the Ringleader. Chris is going to take 2 from the tokens and now untap on his turn, finds a Ponder on top, and flips that Delver of Secrets. So Max is currently tapped out, as is his Aether Vial, so no shenanigans there. Delver of Secrets now Insectile Aberration and is going to be able to connect for 3 if Chris wants to attack. So he's going to go ahead and Ponder here.
That attack may have been a little premature there for Max. He's not out of the woods yet as far as this race is concerned. Chris could find a removal spell here and crash for 8, dropping Max to 6, and then suddenly Max is within burn spell range. I think we may just see Chris do that play, depending on how aggressively he wants to play it. Chris is going to have to gauge just how fast he thinks Max can deal damage back to him. Goblins can be explosive when it wants to be.
And he's going to go ahead and crash in and let that Goblin Matron get in the way of that Tarmogoyf. He's fine with that. Acts as a form of the Abyss.
And there's the second Tarmogoyf. So instead, Chris is going to try to get complete value out of that shot, I believe it is a Chain Lightning on top of his deck.
So Chris tapped out right now with 2 Tarmogoyfs and an Insectile Aberration in play. Lone untapped creature is a Tarmogoyf. They are both 5/6, if that die is correct.
Yeah.
Max Tietze with a 3 counters on his Aether Vial, 2 Goblin tokens, and 4 lands.
So a 5/6 Tarmogoyf is a card that's pretty difficult for Goblins to answer. Max in his hand does have a Gem Palm Incinerator, which Pikula knows about. But it really, right now, can only kill the Insectile Aberration. What Max can try to do is if he can get this Goblin Sharpshooter in his hand online, that can possibly deal enough damage to start killing Tarmogoyfs.
Sharpshooter is an amazing card when it really starts to get going. You've seen cards like it since then, but nothing really that can match its effect to just, kill something, untap, just repeatedly in one turn.
Yeah, the question for Max is going to be, can he stay alive long enough to cast all these cards?
Yeah, so looks like Goblin War Chief off of the Aether Vial, and then Goblin Sharpshooter off of the Cavern of Souls.
Yeah, interestingly enough, he left. So he may go for Mog War Marshal here as well. He's going to need some amount of blockers.
Yeah, there you see the Sharpshooter. There's that Greg Staples artwork. I loved that artwork when I first saw it, all the way back in 2002 Onslaught. It doesn't untap, but whenever a creature is put into the graveyard, you can untap it, and it gets to ping target creature or player. So a lot of times you end up using the Sharpshooter to deal with a 1 toughness creature. It goes to the graveyard. The Sharpshooter untaps, you can deal with another 1 toughness creature. You can use it in concert with the Gem Palm Incinerator, as you mentioned. So he can do a lot of kind of crazy things with that Sharpshooter. And sometimes just a bunch of creatures die, and you Sharpshooter, you're just pinging your opponent the entire time.
So what we saw here, Max swung the 2 1/1s. Chris knew he was not actually able to block because he knows Max had a Gem Palm Incinerator in hand. Max was then able to follow it up with a Mog War Marshal and Wastelanded Chris off of red mana.
Chris is going to brainstorm here during his turn, and Max has quite the army at this point.
Yeah, and this is really that explosive ability of goblins. Remember that also that Gem Palm Incinerator does have haste, thanks to Goblin War Chief. So Max is actually threatening a lot of damage here.
Gem Palm Incinerator or Goblin Sharpshooter, is that what you were referring to?
Sharpshooter does have haste, thank you. You know, Gem Palm Incinerators you typically don't cast.
Yeah, usually they are used as removal, and you get to draw a card. So we're going to have a Chain Lightning from Chris Pikula targeting that Sharpshooter, so Max wants to at least get 1 damage out of it, and he does.
The worry here was that while the Sharpshooter was in play, Chris couldn't even attack at all, because Max could chump block with a Goblin, and then she'd deal 2 damage to the Insectile Aberration.
Yeah. So Sharpshooter goes away, gets 1 damage in, and in the meantime, Chris is just going to swing with the Insectile Aberration.
Yeah, I think Chris has realized that he's on the wrong side of this race right now. He's going to... the Insectile Aberration swing is good as it puts Max down to 8, but he also knows that Max has a Gem Palm Incinerator left in his hand.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a little bit of a puzzle to see how Chris plans on dealing the remaining 8 damage.
Yeah, in the meantime, Max is just building up an army. And the Mog War Marshal here going to the graveyard. Going to leave behind a buddy again. That one has haste as well because of the War Chief. Goblin War Chief, another Onslaught block Goblin that was very powerful even in Standard. Made Goblins very powerful in Standard alongside Goblin Pile Driver. That was a deck actually I played quite a bit back in Onslaught era Standard. Makes your Goblins cheaper and your Goblins have haste.
It's interesting. It's one of those cards that I think at first it's not evident how powerful it is until you play with it a couple of times. Right?
Yeah.
This card is off the charts good.
Yeah, generating mana and then just the haste on all your guys. I mean, it's exactly what you want out of an aggressive creature. Exactly what you want for an aggressive creature deck. You're able to give your guys haste, and then not only that, but just play more of them in 1 turn. So even if you are worried about a sweeper, you can usually get in 1 swing with all those guys, and it might be enough before the sweeper ever comes online. So a second Goblin War Chief from Max off of that Aether Vial, and we're going to see Gem Palm Incinerator cycled to deal with a Tarmogoyf, and Chris has a Stifle for the Incinerator.
Right. So he can either stifle the damage trigger, or he can stifle the drawing of a card on Gem Palm Incinerator, but because those are 2 different triggers, he has to let one of them happen. Clearly, he's going to
save his Tarmogoyf, yeah.
Saving his creature and letting Max draw a card.
Yeah, now the interesting thing, that's from Legions, which was a set, it was the second set in the block, and it was all creatures.
That's probably something we would not see R&D do anymore. It was a little gimmicky.
Yeah.
But interestingly, so you had a lot of these spell creatures, like Gem Palm Incinerator, a card not really designed to be cast as a creature, but because the set was all creatures, it
was a way to get around that whole, well, we need some spells in this set, but they need to be creatures too, so this is the way that R&D chose to deal with it. Extra abilities on cycling, and that made all those spells uncounterable as well.
Yeah, and that great card advantage engine in Goblins showing its head again. We have Goblin Matron searching out another Gem Palm Incinerator. I think what I'm seeing here is that if Max realizes if he can kill, all he needs to do is kill the relevant threats from Chris Pikula.
Yeah.
The longer this game goes on, he'll just continue to make more Goblins.
And you see Goblin Matron there, able to tutor up any Goblin, originally printed in Urza's Saga. with that nice cartoony style artwork from Dieter Litzy. You actually see the goblin holding a baby. I think it's just one of the more amusing bits of magic artwork.
It's a mother goblin.
Yeah. And you're going to see these Tarmogoyfs come over, and we're going to see Max go ahead and chump block with 2 of his goblin tokens. The Insectile Liberation gets in for 3. I think Max now at 5, and a Nimble Mongoose going to join the force. Pretty sure Chris has Threshold at this point.
It's close. I believe so as well, though. One question is, so you really need to start counting damage on both sides of the table. Just how many goblins can Max make? How much damage is it going to do?
Right.
Who's actually winning this race?
Yeah, keep in mind something like Goblin Sharpshooter, which costs red and 2, is now a single red.
Right.
Goblin Matron, I believe, same casting cost, now costs a single red.
Yeah, so one Sharpshooter, now to be fair,
that
Sharpshooter is a 1-of in the deck,
yes.
so we're not drawing that one, but absolutely right for Goblin Matron. He can do plays like Matron into Ringleader for a grand total of just 3 mana.
And you see actually a Goblin Siege Gang Commander, I'm sorry, not Goblin anything, but Siege Gang Commander now is going to bring along 3 buddies, and I think that Siege Gang Commander only costs 3.
Goblin Pile Driver.
Yeah.
That's a lot of attackers. The Pile Driver is humongous and has to be blocked.
Yeah, it's protection from blue.
Fortunately, the Nimble Mongoose is green, so Chris is going to make that block. But he counts the rest of the attackers, and that is lethal.
And
Max Tietze gets the first game.
Overwhelming force of goblins, and that just shows the power of that deck and those cards. Like you said, it's got such a card advantage engine, and a lot of the cards are card advantage. You look at Gem Palm Incinerator that goes, hey, I'm uncounterable removal and I draw a card.
What I really like about how Max set up that game is that despite being the red deck, and he started out as a defensive deck, and at some point in the middle you realize that Max he had somewhat stabilized, and he got aggressive early on with a couple of Mog War Marshal tokens, but then kind of backed up and started chump blocking again. He really saved all his he played it very defensively for most of the game, even when it seemed like he had an advantage, until he could had so much advantage achieved that he could win the entire game on one swing.
Yeah, and it was just one of those, I'm going to build up an army as long as I can survive just a bit longer. I can do this. I can overwhelm you with all these cards. And Siege Gang Commander is army in a box.
Right.
Army in a can, I suppose, is the actual expression. But going to the sideboards, how do we think we're going to react? If you're Chris Pikula, what are you going to do against a Goblin deck?
Well, if you're Chris Pikula, ideally what you want to do is just do the regular Rug Delver plan and really not let him cast spells. Obviously, you can't control when that happens. Removal is helpful because the thing about Goblins is it doesn't really get, at 1 mana it has a Lackey, so for some really explosive draws. But at 2 mana it has Mog War Marshal. It doesn't really get its game going until around turn 3. So if you can kill some of the early drops, it really allows you to be very aggressive with the deck. We see he has 2 Rough Tumbles in his sideboard. And that just as the fact that it's another removal spell is probably something which we'll see him use.
Yeah, we saw that actually in the earlier match. I believe for the win, in fact.
Right. So cards like Stifle are not as powerful in this matchup, and we may see him board some of those out. Other than that, he does have 1 Pithing Needle in his board as well. Sometimes it's not a card you would necessarily consider boarding in, but it's actually pretty good. It takes out Ether Vial and actually does stop the cycling, I believe, on Gem Palm Incinerator.
Huh, interesting. I didn't actually realize about that cycling.
I believe it is an activated ability.
On Max's side, a couple cards stand out to me against this Rug Delver deck. Mostly this card, I played it in a land tax deck, which was written about by Reed Duke back when land tax was unbanned in Legacy. But Relic of Progenitus does a great job of handling the graveyard of the Rug Delver decks. There's 3 copies of it in Max's sideboard. Now, just being able to shrink Tarmogoyfs and shrink Nimble Mongooses, Tarmogoyfs in range of, it'll put the Tarmogoyf in range of Gem Palm Incinerator much easier. Nimble Mongooses are going to end up just being 1/1s. And you can draw a card off of it. So that's something that he could consider bringing in. The other card that jumps out at me is Thalia. While it's not a goblin, I think Chris's deck plays a lot of non-creature spells, and he runs off of very few lands. So Thalia may make a big impact.
I think both those cards are really valid strategies, especially on the play of Thalia's backbreaking. I think it's so strong that Max still plays it on the draw. The Relic of Progenitus play is very interesting because one of the things we noticed is that Max doesn't have a lot of early games, so if he actually thinks he can get value off Relic of Progenitus, he will probably, like, I guess if it's in his opener, he probably will have some time in the early game where he can just cycle it if he wants to at very little penalty. So because of that, having a card which is sometimes good is acceptable to play if he thinks that he has time to use it.
Yeah, and again, it's one of those cards that I was playing it in the land tax deck, which had miracles in it. So the relic, the draw part of it was very relevant in that deck. So much more valuable there. But I did see the power of it against Delver lists when I would play it early and just sit there and say, hey, remove a card from your graveyard, remove a card from your graveyard. Even if it's Chris's choice, the fact that it keeps him off a threshold and keeps those Tarmogoyfs manageable, that may be fine, because even if it just sits there and activates, and then at some point maybe Max just wants to draw a card.
What's interesting if he's removing Chris's graveyard, he's probably shrinking a Tarmogoyf rather easily, and that's due to the fact that a lot of times when you have a Tarmogoyf, both players are contributing to the Tarmogoyf count, so there's duplicates of everything.
Right.
Max isn't a very good team player with a growing Tarmogoyf, so his whole deck is creatures.
It's creatures and Aether Vial. That's really
so maybe if his Aether Vial gets countered, then he's going to throw an artifact in and he'll help out there. But other than that, Max is only going to make that. It's just going to be a 2/3 from his graveyard. There could be lands, and there could be lands off Bloodstained Mire and Scalding Tarn. There could be creatures. That's about it. Any bigger on the Tarmogoyf, and Chris is going to have to do that himself.
Yeah, I mean, he's got one red Elemental Blast, which he could bring in just as a nice bit of removal for Delver, or just a counter spell to a counter spell, something like that. And that could, of course, grow the Tarmogoyf one bigger if that's the scenario that comes up. Yeah,
the red blast is an interesting sideboard, and I'm not sure. I know that with goblins, you really don't want to change too many cards to the deck. I'm interested to see how Max plays this as being a really big veteran with the goblins deck.
Right.
You can red elemental blasting, even as much as a brainstorm, can be a very powerful play against a deck like Rug Delver, which oftentimes will have 2 lands in play, a brainstorm and a fetch land.
So we're underway. We've got a turn 1 Delver of Seekers from Chris, down a game to Max Tietze here in round 6 of 8 of the StarCityGames.com Legacy Open Series, live from Philadelphia. We've got a Bloodstained Mire on turn 1 from Max, immediately cracking it to find a land. He may have a turn 1 Aether Vial.
Yeah, so if we want to know, for just putting this in context of the larger tournament, there are 7 undefeated players, which, if you count 7 players at 5-0, and Max is the 8th undefeated player at 4-0-1. What that means is that those 4 matches, the 4 players who win those matches, presumably would be able to double draw into the top 8. If Chris Pikula wins, that will certainly be the case. If Max wins, that will throw a wrench in things, as Max actually can't double draw because he's already taken a draw in the tournament.
So Chris fails to flip his Delver there on turn 2 and passes back to Max, who had no further play, was just playing around the Stifle there with that fetch land on turn 1. So
yeah, Goblins uses fetch lands very differently than other decks in Legacy because it doesn't play Brainstorm.
Right, doesn't care about exactly when it's cracking them. It doesn't need to maximize the use.
No, it just wants to make sure it gets the land.
Exactly.
For the most part.
Essentially just wants that land. So we've got a Taiga on turn 2 from Max, and seems to have something in mind here. Possibly just it looks like
Tin Street Hooligan.
Yeah.
He did pay. The question is if he paid, whether or not he paid the green for it. Very relevant.
Yeah.
It blows up an artifact. Actually, that's why the green is in his deck. He has this in the main, and he has Krosan Grip in the sideboard.
Yes. So the Hooligan's just going to come down and hang out, and Wasteland from Chris Pikula is going to take out that Taiga, and the Hooligan's now going to attack.
It looks like the hand Chris kept needed a little bit of help. He's really hoping that this Delver flips, and that's a huge amount of help for it.
Yeah.
He kept in a turn 1 Delver with a Wasteland is a hand you can rarely ship from in Rug Delver. Brainstorm really solves the problem. If you have a fetch land, a Brainstorm solves the problem of almost every hand in Legacy.
So the Delver flips off that Brainstorm, and Chris is going to cast it main phase here. Right now the board is 2 Volcanic Islands, Insectile Aberration, and that's on Chris Pikula's side. On Max's side, Tin Street Hooligan, Basic Mountain.
Yeah, and Chris, feeling the punishment of having a lot of lands, something Rug Delver never wants, he's put back only lands, plays a fetch land, is going to crack it. Which is that's the situation to me where Brainstorm feels like Ancestral Recall.
Right.
Rug Delver doesn't need more than 4 lands. It already has 4, so you drew 3 cards and then got rid of lands 5 and 6. It's really similar to saying 1 blue, draw 3 cards.
Yeah.
Which isn't remotely fair.
So you're going to see Tropical Island from Chris off of that Flooded Strand. And looks like we've got some further action here. A Tarmogoyf pre-combat, and then Chris is going to swing in with that Insectile Aberration, knocking Max down to 15. Tarmogoyf currently a 2/3 according to the die. Looks like land and
instant as he brainstormed. But 2/3 is big enough to tango with Tin Street Hooligan. And really, so when Max plays that card, he is not playing Tin Street Hooligan for its damage dealing potential. Sure, it's a 2/1, and actually it got in more damage than he may have expected it to, which that number is 2.
Yeah.
You need a critical mass of goblins for Gem Palm Incinerators. And on top of that, it blocks cards fairly well.
So Hooligan gonna swing in here.
All right, Pikula has to figure out what he's up to.
Yeah, because he could put the Tarmogoyf in front of it, but he decides, no, I think I'll just let it hit me.
So what you could expect is Max could post-combat play a Relic of Progenitus and crack it. Then trying ways that this could actually kill the Tarmogoyf or make it trade with the Tarmogoyf. I don't know if he's boarded them in or what's in his hand. I'm trying to brainstorm. Yeah, think of brainstorm. I'm trying to think of ways in which this is, obviously that attack is very suspicious.
So a Rishadan Port comes down for Max Tietze, and he
could also Pyrokinesis would be his other option.
Pyrokinesis right now on the targeting the Tarmogoyf.
Yeah, and he was hoping for the block there. He would have, if he got the block, he'd get the Delver of Secrets as well.
And we've got a Force of Will from Chris. These are the Alliance's pitch spells facing off against each other. Max pitches the Goblin Sharpshooter to cast the Pyrokinesis. Show us Pyrokinesis, Choi. There it is. So it's just like Force of Will. You may remove a red card and instead of paying the casting cost, and it deals 4 damage divided any way you choose among any number of target creatures. So
yeah, so Pyrokinesis of this cycle is the other one that sees a lot of play. Obviously not as much play as Force of Will, which was the best one out of the cycle, but pretty powerful in creature matchups.
So you see the Pyrokinesis gets countered by the Force of Will, and the Mog War Marshal countered by a Daze from Chris.
Yeah, and things are kind of going the wrong way for Max right now, and this is where Rug Delver can be a jerk, countering all your spells, messing with your mana, and Max finds himself taking a fair amount of damage.
Yeah, just a Mountain, just a Rishadan Port, and a Tin Street Hooligan. That's the only. Those are the only permanents that Max has available at this point. I think he top decked a Ringleader, and I believe that is not the only Ringleader in his hand. Now, while it's a great card, you need to be able to cast it, whether it's off an Aether Vial or 4 lands, but he doesn't have access to
Max
either.
with only 2 lands, he's going to reach and import the Tropical Island on upkeep. And in a pretty rough situation, chump blocking down to 6. He's going to need a lot of help.
So Insectile Aberration hits him. Tarmogoyf is chumped by the Hooligan, and we're going to game 3. Max Tietze unable to mount a defense against those, the primary threats of the Rug Delver deck in the form of Tarmogoyf and Insectile Aberration. 2/3 of the threats of the Rug Delver deck. So if you're just joining us, I'm Joey Pasco in the booth with Matthias Hunt, and we're coming to you guys live from Philadelphia, where the StarCityGames.com Legacy Open Series is 6 rounds deep. Well, we're middle of the 6th round now, and as Matthias was explaining a little while ago, we're getting into the territory where the players that are undefeated, such as Chris Pikula, undefeated and have no draws, may be able to draw in if they can win this round. But if Max Tietze were to take this match here, he is going to kind of throw the math off a little bit, because he is also undefeated, but he has 1 less actual win.
Right, he has a draw right now.
Yeah.
We'll be going to game 3. Max will be back on the play, which is not as relevant from the viewpoint that Max's deck is that much better on the play, but it's pretty helpful to him because what it means is that Chris Pikula's deck is not on the play. Rug Delver really capitalizes on that tempo advantage a ton.
So both players revisiting the sideboards. Didn't see much from Max as far as his sideboard goes. I mean, we saw the Tin Street Hooligan. That, I believe, and the he did see Pyrokinesis as well. That was another one. I'm not necessarily totally surprised to see that brought in, but it wasn't one that I thought was an immediate inclusion. But then again, you think like Pyrokinesis can only deal with Tarmogoyf when it's small enough. And go ahead.
Yeah, what it seems to me he's trying to do is that each of these games we've seen Chris Pikula really has been the aggressive player. He's been making 3/2 flyers. He's been making early Tarmogoyfs, and the question we've been asking is, can Max deal with these cards? And if he can, it seems like the stabilizing part is something that his deck does a lot better. Like, you know, the pulling ahead part. So what he needs to do, the part he's having difficulty with is stabilizing. So what he's boarding the Pyrokinesis to help him just clear up the board at the beginning, so that then he can let his cards like Ringleader win the game for him.
Yeah, so that makes sense, and it is a quote-unquote free spell, even though it costs 2 cards. But there are going to be situations where he's able to actually hit a small Tarmogoyf and a Delver of Secrets, you know, and that way he's able to maybe get 2 for 2 for no mana, which could definitely be ideal, I think, as far as when you're going to use a Pyrokinesis. You'd like to hit multiple spells or multiple cards with it, since it's going to cost you 2 cards yourself.
Exactly.
Force of Will tends to not have that option. You can't necessarily Force of Will 2 spells
at once.
So you're just going to go ahead and have to take the 2 for 1. Pyrokinesis, though, is able to actually do that in certain scenarios. Now, again, they've got to be manageable. A 2/3 Tarmogoyf and an Insectile Aberration are out of range of a Pyrokinesis. But if the Tarmogoyf's a little smaller or the Delver hasn't flipped, it's open. So we'll see how things go. Chris now going to be on the draw, Max on the play here in Game 3 of Round 6 of the StarCityGames.com Legacy Open. Who do you think's got this? Max
Well,
on the play.
You know, Max is on the play, and I've been really impressed. I've been really impressed with how both players are playing this match. Both of them pretty seasoned veterans here. Max with a quick keep, Chris Pikula not with a quick keep at all. You know, based on that, I'll give the advantage to Max.
Sure, you're just using
yeah, I know, not actually answering the question. But I mean, this one can go either way, really. I think I like the Rug Delver deck a little more in the matchup,
Yeah.
so I would give Chris a slight odd.
Chris still seems to be thinking about his opener. We can see he's got Wasteland, he's got Tarmogoyf, he's got Ponder. Didn't get any of those other cards. Just trying to, trying to imagine his first few turns with what he's got there and kind of see if it's worth doing.
Yeah, the hand's probably pretty borderline. You know, maybe doing a couple of computations as to figure out, you know, what he needs to draw to make it into the hand he wants to do and what the odds of him getting there are.
The good news for Chris is Max's deck isn't explosive early. It can be explosive for sure, but it's not usually explosive early. In fact, I think Rug Delver is more explosive early.
Right, so after a long amount of decision, Chris decides to go to 6 cards.
Yeah. Taking the safer route. Well, presumably safer. He could draw 6 that are worse than his opening 7. Could draw the same 6 of the same 7, which, you know, that's always the worst.
Right, if you draw the exact same hand minus
like,
1 card.
Well, that was...
Well, sure glad I put that card back.
Right. But, yeah, so...
The good news for Chris is if he has just a couple threats and a well-timed counter spell, Rug Delver's pretty potent on down a card. As long as he has, what the deck can always do is the deck only needs 3 lands to function. So as long as it doesn't flood out, maybe he can keep hands with remarkably low amounts of lands in them and still have ones with still lots of business spells.
See, Drew Levin in the background's finished up his match. Not sure whether that's a thumbs up or thumbs down just yet. Haven't seen him stop by. But we know he's on that combo deck we saw last round. Pretty interesting.
Chris Pikula's 6-card hand now down to 4 cards as he snapped Force of Wills and Ether Vial.
Yeah. Max on the play. Leads with an Aether Vial. It is countered, and now on turn 2, I want to say, yeah, there's a Relic of Progenitus in his hand. There's also, it's either a Wasteland or a Ringleader. As strange as that sounds, they kind of look similar.
Right, so what's interesting here is one of Chris's remaining 4 cards is yet another Force of Will, a card that can be pretty, you never really want the second one. The second one's a pretty bad card.
There you see, it was Wasteland. I think...
The question is whether or not does he actually want to try to play the Mana Denial game? It'll depend on how many lands Max has.
He's going to play a Goblin Pile Driver. Now that card was an all-star in Onslaught block
Right.
Goblin's deck.
1/2 protection from blue. When it attacks, it gets +1/+2 for each other attacking goblin. It really likes attacking in a horde.
Yes, and we saw it take game 1. Well, it was chump blocked game 1, but the rest of the guys got in. And
Right. It was one of many goblins with haste that suddenly came out of nowhere to win game 1 for Max.
I absolutely love the artwork. That's one of my favorite pieces of Magic artwork. Matt Cavada, the artist on that, and you see the goblin being very aggressive to put a soldier in a headlock. So. Delver of Secrets and Nimble Mongoose, speaking of being aggressive, Chris Pikula has 2 1-drops on his second turn to start matching Max. Actually, matching and beating Max's aggression at this point.
Yeah, these 1-drops, I mean, remember, Chris has to be the aggressor in this matchup. As the game goes longer, these games go sour for Chris. So fortunately, he does have those 2 creatures there. The Relic of Progenitus will make his Nimble Mongoose not much of a card, but Delver of Secrets is going to be a pretty big. He needs to do a lot of carrying in this game.
Yeah. So if Max doesn't have a land drop here, can't quite see his hand. He does a good job of holding his hand back, and he's actually, it looks like he's even considering drawing a card here. No, he's just going to activate. Okay.
Yeah, so when Relic is one of those few cards with an instant speed ability where it's correct to activate it as soon as possible all the time. Because you just don't want to give your opponent any more options. The more cards in the graveyard, the worse it is to activate it.
Right.
And there's no
options.
time like now where there are the fewest number of cards in a graveyard.
Exactly. So he activates the Relic. Chris has to remove Force of Will. And it looks like Max has another play here. Yeah, we can see him tap the Mountain. Oh, and he's going to actually crack the Relic to draw a card. So he draws a Scalding Tarn.
It's a really interesting decision. When you look at Max's hand, the one thing his hand is clearly lacking is lands. So I think he's going for it. He's just trying to get more lands. He's not so much worried that 5 turns down the road, the Mongoose will be a 3/3. He said he can deal with that when it happens. It's more important that he casts all his spells.
Yeah, that seems to be the line of play he's chosen here. Now he is cracking that Scalding Tarn. Pauses for a second. You're not going to stifle that, are you, for no mana somehow? and then it goes and fetches. I believe Chris actually sided out the stifles. I think you brought that up earlier.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Chris needs to establish threats really well, and so he can't play too many cards that are not threats themselves. And Stifle is one of the cards that's not much of a threat.
Max still appears to be deciding which land he is fetching. And he goes with a Taiga.
That's a Tiger for Max Tietze. And it's very possible he doesn't have a land to be playing there. He's just doing that, right, you said, to avoid a possible Stifle.
And Insectile Aberration flips off of a Brainstorm, and now Chris is able to be even more aggressive with that Insectile Aberration, swinging in for 3.
One of the difficulties Chris is going to have here is that Goblin Piledriver is a very good racer as well.
Yeah.
As long as, and especially, the life totals here right now, 18 and I believe 16 for Max, are pretty close. And as Max draws more goblins, that Piledriver will do an excellent job of counter racing the Insectile Aberration.
So Goblin Matron now on the stack. Chris is going to respond with a Brainstorm. He did not side out all his stifles because I see one there in his hand.
Possibly still has them all. He's digging here for a daze, almost certainly.
Found a Lightning Bolt, which I think that was a Lightning Bolt he put back on top.
With no
red
mana.
sources right now, yeah. And he's going to put Stifle as the top card. Oh, reconsidering.
What's more interesting here is that Chris does not have the shuffle effect he's looking for. So remember, whatever cards he puts back, he's going to have to draw them again. So he can kind of sculpt out how his next couple of turns are going to be.
Right. Well, he does have Ponder, which is actually the card he chose to put on top.
Oh, okay.
So he has a shuffle effect there. And he's actually going to keep the Stifle and cast the Stifle on the Goblin Matron's ability. So it's just a 2/2 for 3.
A 1/1 for 3.
Oh, I'm sorry, a 1/1 for 3. Yeah, you're right. And Goblin Piledriver going to go ahead and attack as a Squire, because those goblins actually need to be attacking for it to get
Max needs to maximize how much damage he's doing here, even if it's just 1. If Chris attacks back with Nimble Mongoose into the Goblin Matron, Max has decided that's a trade he's just fine.
Absolutely. It is a 1/1 Mongoose right now.
But as you can see, Max here is choked up on mana. He's got a lot of play in his hand, but he's not able to use too much of it.
And a Thought Scour from Chris is going to scour away Daze and Lightning Bolt, and he's going to draw a Tarmogoyf.
Yeah, he had to stifle, by the way. That trigger there, he could have waited, because that was probably going to find a Gem Palm Incinerator just to down the Delver of Secrets.
Yeah.
In which case, if he stifles that trigger, as we saw before, Max still gets a card. So the only way to actually deny Max the card is to stifle the Matron.
So Chris, now pondering, sees Chain Lightning, Wasteland, and Polluted Delta. So there's some lands there. He's going to be able to get a red source if he wants off of that Polluted Delta. And he can draw into a Chain Lightning if he can hold that Polluted Delta back.
Yeah, and Thought Scour, one of the reasons he has this one-up Thought Scour in his deck is, remember, Thought Scour does a bunch of heavy lifting in getting a player up to Threshold. The Thought Scour itself mills 3 cards. Chris Pikula is actually already up to 6 cards in his graveyard. This Mongoose is becoming a threat.
So Ponder finishes resolving. He draws Wasteland. He's
There's
go
card
use
7.
It. Yeah, and he's going to use it, go to get Threshold, deal with the Taiga on the other side of the board, and now he's swinging in with 2 3-power attackers. Max unwilling to make that trade. Does not want. Well, it's not even a trade. It's a chump block with the Matron there. So
yeah, and the winds of this game have swung over to Chris Pikula's favor. Especially that Thought Scour was huge, as he was able to put the cards he didn't want on top of his deck with Brainstorm, go through them with Thought Scour, achieve even post Relic Representatives, hit Threshold on his Nimble Mongoose, and now he has Max on a 2-turn clock.
And now you see, like, I feel like maybe that Relic should have stuck around a little longer. I think while Chris obviously would have been reaching close to Threshold, I don't think he would have been there had Max just been activating that every turn. Even if it was just 6 cards right now, I kind of feel like he would have been 1 card shy.
So earlier on in the game, we saw Max reluctantly crack the Relic of Pretendus because he did not have his 3rd land. He used the Relic to find his 3rd land. As you see right now, lands continue to be an issue for him, as the Rug Delver deck does play a lot of Wastelands. I think you're absolutely right. And if he had probably wishes he had the kind of hand which would have allowed him to keep Relic of Pretendus around to stop this from happening.
So you see a Goblin Lackey and a Tin Street Hooligan that plays this turn after fetching a basic mountain with the Scalding Tarn. He's going to go ahead and get in with the Matron and the Pile Driver, so that's a total of 4, I believe.
Max left back just enough power to trade with Nimble Mongoose. Both players here knowing exactly what line they want to be on, and instead of swinging the Mongoose and trading both of those there, Chris Pikula decides just to take to the air with the Insectile Aberration, putting Max down to 6, I believe, and gum up the ground with a Tarmogoyf and now the 3/3 Shroud Goose.
Yeah, see, all 3 of Chris's creatures are 3 power. That Tarmogoyf is 3/4. And Max's turn, he adds a 2nd copy of Wasteland to the board, and now with 4 mana is going to cast Goblin Ringleader, and it is resolving. Finds another Ringleader and another Pile Driver alongside a Rishadan Port and a Cavern of Souls that are going to go to the bottom here. So 2 goblins off of that Ringleader, which does have haste, by the way.
Which does have haste, so remember, this Pile Driver can push a lot of damage, but the bigger thing which he doesn't have is an answer to this Insectile Aberration.
Yeah.
And Chris Pikula, so Max is going to have to put together an Alpha Strike that deals 13. And I don't think he can be able to do it without the help of a Goblin War Chief. If he hits War Chief off there, he could go War Chief into Pile Driver for a very lethal swing, because both those Pile Drivers would be so huge. But I think barring that happening, he's going to need to draw a Gem Palm Incinerator.
Yeah, we'll see what's coming up. Insectile Aberration. Oh, wait. Chris says, hold on a second. Yeah. Okay, he's going to go ahead and attack with the Insectile Aberration itself.
And we're not even going to get to that next turn. Chris Pikula casting Chain Lightning.
Yeah.
Okay, no,
he looks like Max is like,
hand, and he's like, wait, show me the red source.
Yeah, let me get my land here. So there you go. Chris Pikula takes the game and match 2 games to 1 over Max Tietze. Rug Delver